Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Pi Records, and I'm here with Steve from Outronaut. How are you, Steve?
Not bad, Ryan. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. I found
You
out,
see me okay? Do you see everything?
yeah, everything looks great. I love the keyboard.
Well, not everything. I should say everything. I'm not wearing pants, so maybe you don't want to see everything.
That's an
Uh,
old news
but
joke.
yeah. Um, so yeah,
So
nice shirt. How you doing?
let's talk about your music. I listened to your 2020 release, and I love how you go between like the psychedelic stuff and like the surf stuff. It really melds well. Where'd you get the idea for that?
Um, well, probably because I grew up listening to the Beatles and Iron Butterfly and Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. Like those things had a the first thing I think probably the first stuff that ever influences you and makes a big impression on you, you're you're kind of stuck with it. I mean, you can never get too far away from that stuff. And obviously over the years you start listening to different kinds of music, and in my case maybe going in recently, maybe in the last 7 years, going backwards. Like I never heard the Shadows until about 7 years ago,
Oh,
and that made a huge impression on me. It was almost like that's what you do with a Stratocaster, like it's just beautiful melodic music. And but the influence of the things that he influenced, things that Hank Marvin and the Shadows influenced, like Pink Floyd, um, that stuff never goes away. So I'm not sure if I answered the question very well or not, but
yeah, yeah, sure.
it melts together. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Well, tell me about Chicago. There's a lot of like the Breakers and 13 Kikis. Like there's a lot of instro and a kind of across the board, not just strictly surf. How does that all fit together, and how do you guys all get shows together?
Well, we just started playing in September of 2019, and then after our third show, COVID happened. Um, so we still haven't played that many shows yet. But we've played quite a few shows with indie rock bands that have vocals. Mostly, I think we've played shows. I think maybe even exclusively at this point, we've played shows with bands that have vocals. It's that we could just throw ourselves into that mix and not necessarily be uh, pigeonholed or whatever. And there are some vocals on some of our recordings, although we don't ever do vocals live. But you're right. There are some instrumental bands that are playing heavy rock, and there's bands like Pelican who've been around a long time playing heavy instrumental music. And but Chicago's just such a melting pot. There's a very big Americana scene in Chicago, and that's obviously, when I say Americana, what does that even mean? It's pretty broad, but the broadness is kind of a good thing because you get people who are open-minded to anything that's vaguely on the one hand familiar, on the other hand fresh and original, but has a framework that they can recognize, and they can still drink beer to it. You know what I mean? So it's not too upsetting. It's not like, wait, I can't drink beer to this. Uh, so we just played out at Fitzgerald's, which is actually it's actually technically a suburb of Chicago. It's in Berwyn, Illinois. It's a 1920s roadhouse. Really neat place. 100-year-old building. The stage and everything is original from 100 years ago, and it's really neat. And they loved us. It was fun.
Awesome. So where did the name Altronaut come from? I'm sure people ask you that 100 times.
Well, the hardest thing about starting a new musical entity, one of the very, very hardest things, is naming it. It's just, I mean, I think there's only like maybe 50 great band names in the history of music. You just have to come up with a name, and you have to, I think outro, I mean, outro, I think of that meaning like the underture, the postscript. It actually came from, the idea came from film music, from the idea of films and film scores and the music that you hear in films. And when I started this project, I wasn't even thinking about playing it live. I wasn't even thinking. I was just thinking about making music that would be really cinematic and you know, I guess so maybe over and over in my history of playing music, I'll say, you know, maybe I could just do something that will be strictly a studio project. The last two bands that I've started, they started out as the idea was it's just going to be a studio project. I'm never going to play this stuff live, and then it gets teased out, and you know, pretty soon someone floats the idea of playing it live. In this case, it was the drummer, because the drummer and I, the Outronaut drummer, John Carpenter, he and I have been playing together for decades. We backed singer-songwriters together. We've played reggae music together back in the 1980s. We've done all sorts of stuff together, and we were making the third of the Outronaut releases, and he said, you know, we got to play that stuff. We got to play this live. And it's like, and then there was another Chicago band, an instrumental kind of a surf-ish band called the San Andreas Fault, and I went and saw them play, and that's where I saw Peter Michon, who's the other guitarist in Outronaut now. I saw him play with this band, San Andreas Fault, and I said, well, if we were going to play this stuff live, that would be the other guy. And so it just, you know, he happened to be interested. We saw each other at a George Harrison birthday celebration at a club called Martyrs in Chicago, and somehow he had heard some of the Outronaut recordings. They'd never been played live, and he heard some of that stuff, and he said, hey, I heard some of that instrumental stuff you're doing. I liked it. I said, oh, really? That's funny, because I was thinking if we were ever going to play that stuff live, you would be the guy. And he said, yeah, I want to do it. And I was like, whoa, okay. So now, you know, at that point, it's like, oh, it's out. The genie's out of the bottle. I guess we got to do it. So, so we started playing some shows, and then COVID happened. That slowed us down a little bit, but that's all right. We don't play that often. You know what I mean? We'll play 5, 6 shows a year. That's enough.
Yeah. I mean, probably because you have a ton of other musical projects going on, right?
I don't have a ton anymore, but I did before COVID. I had more before COVID. But I do play in a David Bowie tribute with Chris Connolly. He's the vocalist. He's a Scottish fellow who he had a band called Revolting Cocks, and he was in a band called Ministry.
Oh yeah.
The drummer and him, they started that band. Yeah, we just played. We were going to play on David's 75th birthday, but that was January, and COVID was heavy, so we pushed that back. And that band doesn't play that often either. I could play a couple shows a year and be happy, because it doesn't lose its. It doesn't. I don't want it to lose any of its power. You know, I don't want it to become a routine thing. So,
Like, you don't want to get bored doing the same thing.
yeah, I don't want it to turn into a job. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how you get your sound. You mentioned the Stratocaster. Is that what you're playing on the record?
Yeah, quite a few of them. Yeah, quite a few of those songs are Stratocasters, or the Surfcaster, which was an instrument that Charvel came out with in the early 90s. Yeah, yeah, the Hank Marvin and the Shadows, that was the big inspiration for Outronaut. I mean, I played in a lot of bands, all, you know, since I was in grade school, and I guess most of them were heavier rock. When I was as an adult, most of them were heavier, a little bit heavier rock, and when I heard some of that stuff, I love when that happens, when something can inspire you so much that it will kick you into this. It'll open up a whole nother door of like, kick you into a whole nother direction of, you know, all of a sudden I started writing all this music along those lines. And but yeah, mostly Fender type guitars, and you know, the usual the usual stuff. Um, yeah, there's nothing terribly surprising in the arsenal.
Well, what do you have going on right now as far as recording, writing, playing out?
I just finished mixing uh, an EP, which will be our fifth release. Um, Everything's out there on Bandcamp, and this thing just needs to be mastered. Um, it's it's in spots it does get a little heavier. I was kind of, I guess I wrote the songs during the maybe the worst part of COVID, and there's one song that has vocals, and pretty much every release has one song with vocals, and this one is yeah, it's got one song with vocals, but it's mostly like, you know, that same balance of like there's the pretty songs, and then there's the ones that are a lot more sort of aggressive and angular and angry, I guess you could say. Um, and I think it's maybe a little darker, a little heavier, but it's pretty brief. It's just 6 pieces of music, and I just got to get it. It's going to be mastered by a fellow in Milwaukee. It should be out. I think I'll have it out on Bandcamp in about a month.
Are you gonna look at doing any physical releases for it?
Um, Probably not at the moment. I mean, I'm not sure how to. I'm not sure how to tackle that. I mean, I would like to see there be. I'd like to see more of a balance come back between the formats of, you know, purely digital and then purely analog. I mean, you know, it seems like it's all or nothing right now. You either do the vinyl or you just do the digital download, and people don't even want to, you know, they don't even, people won't even take a CD if you try to give it to them, it seems like.
Oh,
Um, and CD, I mean, you know, they sound pretty good in your car. They're, you know, they're portable. They're all right with me. I think some music sounds better on CD, depending on what it is. But yeah, I've got I can play you a song from the EP that's about to come out. I got my guitar set up here, and
yeah, absolutely.
um, let's see if this is. Oh yeah, there it is. This is this is Godfinger. It's the title track from the forthcoming EP. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
badass, dude.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks for doing that.
You're welcome. I operate better with a guitar in my hands, I think.
Yeah, I have that when I'm in front of a camera or in front of people. It always feels more comfortable to hold it.
Right?
Yeah,
A prop or something,
yeah,
like armor.
yeah. Right, right. So I want to talk about that Charvel because when I was a teenager, I say about '89, I worked a whole summer to get my guitar, and I chose a Charvel, and that was kind of like supposedly the low end of the Jackson factory,
Mhm.
but I couldn't get over. It had Jackson pickups in it. I couldn't get over how great it felt and how great it sounded to me. It was perfect for what I wanted to do, which at the time was play heavy music. And so I want to know about that guitar. What makes it? I mean, it obviously sounds like uh, a surf guitar, but what is it about that guitar that why you chose it?
Um, you know, it's got the treble, the real attackiness of a Fender guitar, and it looks like it would sound like a Fender. The bolt-on neck and the maple and the shape of it, like it looks like a Jazz Master. It's got the whammy bar. There's a lot of things about it that are very Fendery, but the body is mahogany with a maple top, and it's got a little sound chamber in it, and it's actually quite a bit like warmer and looser than a Fender. It's almost like a cross between a Gibson 335 and a Jazz Master, something like that. They were Japanese. I don't know why they didn't make them very long. I don't know, what was yours, Japanese?
I believe so. I mean, it had the standard Jackson pickups in it,
Mhm.
but I don't remember. But I think they made all the Charvels in Japan at the time.
Yeah, I suppose maybe there was no longer any U.S. Operations.
But in,
It
in
was
in terms of price at the time, it was like $700, which was pretty
for
expensive
the
for a
surf.
Charvel at the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the Surfcasters came out, I think it was 90 or 91. They didn't make it very long. They were $350.
Yeah,
Brand new at Guitar Center. If I recall correctly, they didn't come with a case. There was no case, but it was $350 for a brand new Surfcaster. And so I immediately bought one because just you could tell by looking at it that it was going to be Fendery and all that. But then the first time I used it in a gig, I was shocked at the difference between like the Telecaster and like putting down the Telecaster and plugging in the Surfcaster. The sound was like night and day. I was like, whoa, like, I thought it was going to be, I knew they'd sound different from one another, but I was not prepared for how different. It was just so much more loose and warm. There was a lot more potential for feedback. It was almost like plugging in a hollow body. And I don't know why they stopped making them. Eastwood makes a clone of the Surfcaster now because they're popular enough, but for some reason they didn't catch on. Like, I think to me they should be as standard. I think a Surfcaster should be just as standard a guitar as like a Stratocaster because it's just such a beautiful middle ground between. Because you could have a guitar that's like a middle ground between a Gibson and a Fender, but in a bad way. But the Surfcaster is like the best of both worlds. It just I love it. It's the my main squeeze in the last few years.
is it a I mean it's semi hollow body, so is it really light?
I wouldn't say really light, but it's chambered a little bit. I mean, it's still got a good weight to it. It could be lighter. As the years go by, I could go for a lighter guitar. But, it's not too light. It's not neck heavy. You know what I mean? If you
Yeah,
let go
yeah,
of the
yeah,
neck, it doesn't dive down to the floor.
yeah.
So,
Well, I was really happy that you played that song, so our listeners can hear it. And I advise all them to check you out on Bandcamp because that's where I found you. And there's lots of great stuff on there. Is there anything you wanted to mention or say before we sign off?
well, we had a festival show that was canceled, as probably a lot of people know, and but so the only show we have booked at the moment is a place called Elmhurst Hall, which is out in the suburbs of Chicago. A brand new venue with an LED screen behind the stage,
Oh, nice.
right?
Yeah.
It looks like a nice place. That's on Saturday, August. Oh, my phone's off. I turn my phone off because I'm a professional. I don't want anybody calling me.
I turn mine off too.
I think it's, well, wait, I can consult my calendar here. It's wait a minute. Come on. Come on, computer. Help me out here. Still it is it is Saturday, August 13th.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Computer. Yeah, that's the only show we got on the books right now. But it looks pretty neat. The Waco Brothers just played there, a Chicago band, and you know, I hope to have this Godfinger EP out in about a month. That was the title track that I just played, and looking forward to getting it done. And I really appreciate you having me on. This has been an honor.
Yeah, it's an honor for me. I'm always glad to have some more Chicago bands on, because I think I keep hearing about how rich the music scene is there, and every time I hear a new band, it's always great music, and it's different. It's not East Coast, it's not West Coast. It's its own contained thing, and it's quite an element that I enjoy. So it's an honor for me to have anybody on from Chicago.
All right. Well, I'm representing.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for being on, and I really appreciate you accommodating the schedule, and I really enjoyed hearing your music.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.